February 25, 2009. Turkish Airlines Flight 1951 is seconds away from touching down at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport. But instead of a smooth landing, the aircraft suddenly drops from the sky and slams into a muddy field. 9 people die instantly, including all 3 pilots. It was supposed to be a routine flight on one of the world's safest aircraft, the Boeing 737-800. So how did the world's best-selling jet, flown by an experienced crew, simply fall out of the sky? This is the crash of Turkish Airlines Flight 1951. Flight 1951 took off from Istanbul with 128 passengers on board. Among them, 4 Boeing engineers. The destination, Amsterdam, a city that had not seen a major crash in more than 10 years. On the flight deck, Captain Hasan Arasan, an experienced pilot, is training his new first officer, Murat Sezer. A third pilot, the safety pilot, is also in the cockpit, observing the training. The aircraft is a Boeing 737-800, the latest generation of the world's most popular plane. Millions fly on a 737 every single day. And with modern avionics, landings are supposed to be safer than ever. But as Flight 1951 begins its descent, something strange happens. At over 8,000 feet, a loud alarm sounds in the cockpit. The landing gear warning horn. That warning is supposed to trigger only when the plane is close to the ground. The captain dismisses it, calling it a radio altimeter problem. He's right. But he doesn't realize just how dangerous that problem will become. As the plane lines up with runway 18R, everything looks normal. The crew lowers the gear, extends the flaps, and prepares for landing. But passengers suddenly feel the plane shaking. The stick shaker, warning of a stall, goes off. The captain takes control, shoving the throttles forward. But at only 400 feet above the ground, it's already too late. The 737 crashes into a field just short of the runway. The fuselage breaks into 3 pieces, but remarkably, most of the passengers survive. Nine lives are lost, including the cockpit crew and the Boeing engineers. The big question, why did this advanced jet, on final approach, run out of speed and simply fall? Dutch and American investigators arrive quickly. The wreckage shows no signs of fire, so fuel exhaustion is ruled out. The engines appear to have been running on impact. Some think about a microburst, dangerous wind shear that once brought down a Delta jet in 1985. But the weather data shows no extreme winds. The real clue lies in the cockpit recorders. That strange landing gear alarm at 8,000 feet was caused by a faulty radio altimeter. The 737 has 2, one for each pilot. The captain's altimeter had failed, stuck at a reading of -8 feet. In other words, it thought the plane was already on the ground. That single error triggered a chain reaction. On a 737, the radio altimeter connects to more than just the landing gear warnings. It also feeds data to the auto throttle, the system that controls engine power. Because the captain's altimeter thought the plane was on the ground, the auto throttle went into retard flare mode. That's the mode for landing. It pulls the engines to idle power. So miles away from the runway, the plane's computers were already preparing for touchdown. The engines rolled back to idle and stayed there. Here's the catch: the crew didn't notice. They were descending from above the glide path, a tricky maneuver common at Schiphol that increases workload. While they rushed through landing checklists, nobody was watching the airspeed. Warnings appeared on their screens. First, a red bar, then a flashing box. But in the distraction of training and checklists, the pilots missed them all. By the time the stick shaker went off, the plane had slowed into a full stall, and at just a few hundred feet, recovery was impossible. Investigators dig into the maintenance logs and find something shocking. This wasn't the first time. The very same plane had shown the same altimeter failure, -8 feet, on at least 2 flights in the 48 hours before the crash. Other airlines around the world had also reported similar failures. In fact, Boeing received more than 2,500 reports of faulty altimeters in just 1 year. But because pilots usually noticed and disconnected the auto throttle, the issue was never considered a safety threat until Flight 1951. The Dutch report concluded that the crash was caused by a convergence of problems. A faulty radio altimeter, an auto throttle that trusted bad data, a high workload approach, and a crew that failed to notice their speed dropping. Boeing later worked on fixes to prevent altimeter errors from forcing the auto throttle into landing mode. But the tragedy also raised a bigger question. Are modern planes becoming too complex for humans to manage when things go wrong? Some experts argue pilots should always be in the loop, watching the basics, like airspeed. Others believe automation should prevent mistakes, even when humans fail. Either way, the crash of Flight 1951 is a sobering reminder. No matter how advanced the technology, the ultimate responsibility is simple: fly the airplane.